Our third topic is on mutual cooperation through communities of practice, lessons from organizations on the ground. Our resource speakers will present the theory and praxis of communities of practice and the importance of mutual cooperation and collaboration in peace building. Concrete examples of working COPs and collaborative works will also be presented. Our first speaker is the Country Manager for Global Community Engagement and Resilience Fund for the Philippines, with more than 15 years of experience in prevention and countering of violent extremism. We would like to welcome Ms. Sarah Lemusier. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Our second speaker is the current National Advisor for GCERF. She started her legal career as a litigation lawyer in the private sector and then joined the government, where she gained years of experience in criminal justice response with the Department of Justice. Later on, she joined the Netherlands Embassy as senior political officer, where she handled projects on human rights, anti-human trafficking, preventing violent extremism, and peace building. We would like to welcome Attorney Jennifer Buwan.
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for having us at this session. We're delighted to be able to attend and to give an overview of the ways in which we use collaborative working to increase the impact of the work that we try to do. So if we can move to the next slide, please. And the next slide. So just to talk very quickly about this. So GCERF, the Global Community Engagement and Resilience Fund, was set up 7 years ago with the aim of preventing violent extremism. So that's our sole focus in what we do. The way that we do that changes between the different countries that we work in, and we now work in 15 different countries around the world. And the aim is really to bring the global resources that we're able to get access to. We were set up by a number of different Western donor countries. We now have 19 different donors, and that includes private entities, philanthropic organizations, as well as a variety of different governments. And the idea is really to be able to consolidate these resources, both in terms of the financial funding, but also capacity building and other support in terms of advice and guidance on best practices in how we can prevent violent extremism. And we're then working with what we would call frontline organizations. So those organizations who are most involved in the issues that they're being dealt with, who are most affected by violent extremism. So whether or not that's by the operations of different groups, by recruitment, or by the aftermath of attacks or other issues that have been raised by this. Next slide, please. So the way that we do this is by trying to form consortia a lot of the time. So identifying organizations that are reasonably well established and that have reasonably good operating capacity, and then partnering them with much smaller organizations who are directly in the communities that we want to work in. So organizations who would normally really not have the opportunity to access these kinds of funds and resources because they don't have the internal processes, because they're just not set up to deal with, you know, the very heavy templates and reporting documents that we unfortunately have. But it's really trying to channel the ideas and the funding and the resources from a very high level, but actually right down to the areas where they're absolutely most needed. And that's something that a lot of the time I think gets not forgotten about, but is much harder for other organizations to do. They're at a kind of mid-level area, and then they want to deal with other organizations that can deal with the systems and the processes that are required. So we're really trying to move away from that. And then also part of our mandate is to work with national governments. So we don't come into countries and decide that we know what is best and that we know what to do. We work within national government structures, particularly where there's a national action plan on PCDE, on preventing and countering violent extremism, to make sure that what we're funding is very much in line with nationally identified priorities, but also linking that very clearly to the priorities of the local organizations. So again, we don't tell people what to do. We ask for proposals and then we evaluate to make sure that it's in line with our mandate, with the national priorities, and that there's a clear demonstration of value and impact on the ground through work that organizations have already been doing. So what we're really trying to do is just increase the impact of what organizations are already working on, and in that way to improve the lives of everyone who's associated with this. So one of the ways that we do that is really trying to bring, so building the consortia is one approach. So part of the metrics that we evaluate our programming on is how well the consortia work together. So are the different organizations able to learn from each other? Is the primary recipient who signs the contract with us, are they spreading good practices? Are they supporting the other organizations? Are the other organizations working collectively well together? Are they sharing what they know? Is this combined approach increasing the impact? So that's something that is very much a focus of what we're looking at, and it's increasingly something that we want to bring together, because we've seen that when the consortia work well, they work extremely well, and it brings so much more added value to the impact of the programs, and therefore the number of people that can be positively affected by what we're doing. Next slide, please. So this is just to give a very quick overview of the programming that we are currently funding in the Philippines. And we have these 5 different kind of pieces of the jigsaw. And I think when we initially started working in the Philippines, it was only a couple of years ago. And whenever we go into a country, it's seen a little bit as a pilot project, because we need to understand how the different partners work together, how the different stakeholders engage with each other. And we do refer to our Philippines work as one of the best examples of the GSURF approach. So we funded 8 different projects, but when we were looking at them, there were bits, so there was overlap in some areas. There was certainly different organizations who were working on slightly similar themes in different areas, or different themes in the same areas. And so what we tried to do, and Jen has been absolutely instrumental in this, was really trying to bring everyone together to look at where there is overlap, where there are kind of potentially shared responses to different issues, where there could be discussion around best ways to solve different problems in the same or in different areas. And from what was quite a separate program to begin with, just to see what would work best, we've really seen our partner grantees come together and form a very coherent portfolio. And so we have another round of funding that will be coming up towards the middle and end of this year, so that we can have a smooth transition into our next years of funding. And it's really bringing together this much more consolidated program that leverages the power of being able to unite a number of different organizations together, and to bring all of their different skill sets to solve these very difficult, not intractable problems, but certainly very complex problems. So we'll be using more or less the same approaches for the next round of funding, and really focusing on this idea of inclusivity and diversity. Next slide, please. So just to quickly give you an overview, so we have put $4.2 million so far into the program. I think 50,000 direct beneficiaries was the initial estimate, but I think we're up at 47,000 direct beneficiaries already. and that's before the programs have ended. So we will hopefully be able to exceed that as the target for people who will be positively affected by this. And as you'll see, we have different approaches in terms of how the programs are described, but it's really a very solid focus on, I think, governance, education, and justice have really become the key themes of what we're looking at through different approaches from different grantees. Next slide, please. So one of the ways that we bring people together has been through the national communities of practice, which Jen will talk about in a minute, but also through global communities of practice. So we bring together, we are now funding around about 220 different organizations in the 15 different countries that we work in. And what we try to do is once a quarter, bring together all of these organizations virtually around a particular theme and have a global community of practice. So we've looked at a variety of different issues, from the private sector to community policing, community agency, how you deal with local authorities. And it's bringing together all the different ideas, suggestions, positive experiences, challenges that different organizations have had, and allowing people to present problems, present solutions, and just generally discuss what's going on in different places. And I think I've lived in, I think, 17 countries, and one of the things that always strikes me is that while the local contexts are extremely different and the roots of problems can be very, very different, the way that people respond to basic stimulus is generally the same. If you treat people badly, they will generally behave badly. If you treat people well, you have a much greater chance of having a positive outcome. And I think this is what we see in all of the different countries that we work in, without stereotyping or without kind of imposing different structures. There are huge similarities between the way that people choose to operate and the way that people are more likely to behave. And the more that we can put out these positive responses, working all the way through the chain, so from multilateral structures through to national governments, through to regional and state structures, and then down to very local organizations. I think bringing everyone together and having positive, open dialogue has been incredibly constructive in allowing people to address challenges that they perceived were there or that were actually there, and finding different ways to move ahead. And so we've taken this idea of the global communities of practice, where we had really interesting discussions, but obviously in 2.5 hours, once every 3 months, you can't solve all the issues that you want to. So what we have done now is to set up a global alliance platform, and we'll be launching this formally in the next couple of months. But it's to provide a permanent meeting space for attendees. So it will be initially our grantee partners who we're working with, but we'll open this up to other stakeholders and other potential participants in the coming months. And it's to provide just as wide a possible forum for knowledge sharing amongst partner grantees, capacity building that can be provided both locally or from international organizations, and then also looking at advocacy. So we see similar issues again and again that need to be moved forward, both locally, nationally, and then at a global stage as well. So this is where GSURF is able to bring together multiple different actors at different levels, which is great in terms of the collaboration that we can see. But what we're also going to do is to set up thematic groups, which will hopefully be led by people other than us, to really drive forward key issues that can be changed at national and then at global level as well, which is why we want this advocacy component. Because we believe that by bringing together all of these different local organizations and then giving them access to global actors, we have a very powerful advocacy component to look at these shared issues and where these changes can be made. Next slide, please. So I'm now going to hand you over to Jen. He's going to give you a much more in-depth understanding of how the national communities of practice that we hold work. And they've been very powerful in all of the countries that we've been doing them in. And I think the Philippines, again, it has been one of the key examples that we try to share between different countries just to demonstrate how effective it can be. So Jen, over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. Good afternoon, everyone. Magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. And again, thank you to the Ateneo de Davao University for inviting us to this conference to share our experience on fostering mutual cooperation through communities of practice. I'm very happy to see that many of our partners in the Philippines are also joining us today, and I'm sure they can give a better testament on how we have built these COPs so far and where we want to take them further. So we also look forward to the interaction after our short presentation. But just to go back on the concept of a community of practice. So a community of practice is actually a relatively new term, but the concept has been there, has been practiced for ages. So communities of practice are groups of people who share a concern or a passion for something that they do and learn how to do it better as they interact regularly. So we talk about 4 elements of a community of practice. So we have a shared interest, there's learning together, there's regular interaction, of course, there's the common goal of greater impact. So as Sarah has earlier shared, GSURF is relatively new in the Philippines. In the Philippines, we have a very vibrant civil society. Communities of practice have been in existence for many, many years in the field of peace building. So you all know the different alliances, the different networks, working groups, coordinating platforms. We even have a Weavers group of peace builders. Some are still existing, but many unfortunately are either dormant or defunct or operating separately. So we can actually say that GSURF is the newest kid on the block. Having only started in 2019. We started our work in consultation with government, with different civil society partners, our grantees, and we have been looking at ways to see how these different platforms can come together. We recognize that there are differences in programs, there are differences in systems, and sometimes more challenging are the differences in principles and of key personalities. So we started with very modest efforts to coordinate and dialogue. So of course, the easiest would be to coordinate with our grantees, with our civil society partners. We did regular monthly meetings, which evolved into bi-monthly meetings, and sometimes we even do it on a weekly basis. And separately, we from GSURF meet with our government and other international partners. And then these meetings kind of formed a life of their own and evolved into technical working groups, which then evolved into communities of practice focusing on different themes. So we have us communities of practice focusing on youth recruitment, peace education, madaris, and local governance. And then eventually, from the different discussions, transitional justice became a focus discussion as well. So last year, we formed a national COP on PVE, where we not only have the GSURF grantees, the GSURF partners, but we also included our key government partners, including members of the country support mechanism, led by the Department of Interior and local government. And slowly, we're also integrating our international partners who are present in the Philippines. So these are our donor partners who also should be involved in the discussions in terms of how to coordinate efforts further. So learning from all these discussions, learning from each other, as Sarah has already said, we are crafting a new strategy for the Philippines together with our partners, focusing on education, local governance, livelihoods, and transitional justice. And we hope to continue the dialogue, the interactions, and the communities of practice will continue to build impactful programs, focusing on, first of all, very important, building strong relationships through mutual respect and trust. I think that has been the key component of why we have a strong coordinating platform or community of practice in the Philippines, because of that shared mutual respect and trust among our partners who are working with us. And I think these are very much highlighted, no, in the document on human fraternity, which we have been discussing since this morning. So next slide, please. So just to share with you, so we can actually say that our COPs are really about human fraternity. As Father Joel said this morning, in this morning session, human fraternity is about working together and learning from each other. So in fact, we have a quote here from one of our communities of practice. It's actually a vision statement from the community of practice and local governance. I think Gus is also here in this conference. I think he can read this to you with more feelings. But this is just an example of how we envision having a community of practice working better and with more impact through mutual respect. And lastly, before we close for our session, we would like to share with you an inspiring video from our partners who worked with us in these communities of practice. If I can request the organizers to please share.
Community of practice is a group of people with common interests, with a shared goal, who regularly meet to learn from each other. No? So that's our goal.
So I came here and learned how to listen, how to learn, how to benefit from the experiences of others, and how to share our best practices. Thank you.
It's just the history that will tell us that for so long we have not been given a chance to live in peace.
Sometimes violence has become an alternative platform or avenue for young people's voices to be heard. And this is a challenge in the communities.
As somebody working from the government, I think this is also a great opportunity to build trust between the CSOs and the government and further enhance participatory governance.
We call on all our sectors to be more inclusive, more responsive, more open for collaboration through the establishment of a network of peace enablers.
The efforts have rippled, so to speak, together to hopefully create maybe a tidal wave of peace building and peace transformation efforts.
And to recognize and appreciate the different contexts that CSOs work in and continue to support their vision, mission, passion, and growth.
Declared this 1st December 2021 in Cebu, Philippines.
The commitment made that government agencies will work hand in hand with our civil society partners. And we acknowledge the major role being played by the civil society organization. The most important link of the government and the community are the civil society organizations.
Thank you, everyone. So with that, we end our presentation and we look forward to interacting with you in the question and answer portion.
Thank you, Ms. Sarah and Attorney Jennifer, for inspiring us with your work for mutual cooperation and collaboration in peace building. I'm sure that our participants here, in one way or another, already have or are part of communities of practice within their networks. It is now time for our open forum. We will entertain 3 questions from the Zoom chat box and 3 more questions through the raised hand button. Again, the raised hand feature is found in the lower part of your Zoom application. Sige. Kung wala, siguro I'll start with also how I viewed the presentation. No? I really appreciated when you were talking about communities being consulted and having them participate in the entire process, where they will also feel and have a sense of ownership and responsibility in the projects being implemented on the ground. So that was really interesting, and I'm sure a lot of our participants here already have this kind of approach also when they deal with their partners from the grassroots or from the ground. So that was very appreciated. Yes, we have Mr. Ryan. You might have a question. Ryan Aragon. You can unmute yourself.
Okay, good afternoon to our esteemed discussants and to Ma'am Patricia Alinio. Before I proceed, can I be heard clearly? Okay, so I may, sorry, I couldn't show open my video because my device is having some upgrading issues that prevents me from showing. So I hope it's okay. Since I'm a member of the academy, I'm more interested on the educational efforts of the organization in terms of promoting peace education. Aside from the Madaris program, what are other plans or programs that you might possibly share with us that can in which the school like the other junior high school can be of help in terms of advancing the ideals of peace education. Do you have other like plans or programs that we can possibly join in the future? I'm very interested.
So one of our current grantee partners works on peace education and has been developing modules for this. And in response to a number of similar requests, what we're going to look at doing for our next funding cycle is moving it from one of the vertical pillars to have peace education going across all of the different projects that we're working on, and where that can be moved into. And I think it's also, and Jen, you have the details on this, but also part of a wider discussion with the Department of Education to look at peace education integration. Jen, if you want to speak to that.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. So thank you for that question, sir. So on peace education, like Sarah has said, we have our partner Teach Peace, Build Peace, who have actually created modules on cultures of peace for children, for the youth as well. And these can be used by children in school. So in order to build on that work, they are actually in discussions with not just the Department of Education, but also with the Ministry of Basic, Higher, and Technical Education of the BARM to see where these modules can still be further used in the programming. And we'll be happy to welcome more stakeholders to get your inputs as we discuss further how we expand this work po, no? So so we're happy to meet all of you in this forum this afternoon.
Thank you po. I asked those questions po, ma'am, because based on my experience with the junior high school, some of our students are also leaders who articulated their interest to be engaged in this kind of peace building efforts, and also some of our teachers are also coordinators and experts in curriculum that can maybe perhaps help the organization in terms of crafting modules on peace building lessons and modules. So I hope that your organization might also include like the junior high school and other schools, so that we can also help out in terms of promoting peace and development, especially for our students who have expressed their interest in this kind of endeavor.
Definitely, sir, and we'll be happy to link up with you to see where we can work together. Just to add po, there's actually another program that has ended a few months ago, and this is by the organization Ideals, and they worked on media for peace building, where they also worked with students, actually senior high school students and teachers. Initially, their goal was to work with the schools to put that in the curriculum, media for peace building. But then it took, through the discussions, it was resolved that it's easier to help the teachers craft lesson plans. So they were able to build lesson plans with the teachers, and these are actually being rolled out in different schools in Lanao del Sur and in Maguindanao. So we'll also be happy to link you up if you have partners in those areas.
Yes, ma'am. I believe the school has engagement and linkages with our BARM, with the BARM provinces in our neighboring areas, since we had existing partnerships or MOAs with our partner communities.
Thank you, Sir Ryan. Our next question will come from Miss Frances.
Good afternoon, our distinguished resource speakers, especially for Ma'am Sarah and Ma'am Jen. No? I have a soft spot for Marawi. Many years ago, I was a volunteer teacher. Exactly in 1997, I was a volunteer teacher for Lanao and Balabagan area. I have a question regarding our post-Marawi rehabilitation efforts. Do we have existing programs like for children that have been displaced by conflicts? Like, for example, we have something like art therapies for children. So that's the first question. And the second thing is I'd like to say a word of thanks, because as I was listening to you, I wrote down many keywords. No? This has been a very amazing day for me, because I sit at the foot of masters, and I thank the good Lord, for all these collaborative exchanges. No? So I'm seeing the fruit of the document being operationalized on the ground, and I really thank your efforts. No? So we're celebrating small and big wins this afternoon, And this is really a great day to be an advocate for peace, especially for a better Mindanao for all of us. Salamat, salamat, Ma'am Jen. Ma'am Sarah, thank you very much.
So if I can just briefly answer that, for Marawi, I also have a soft spot for Marawi. We actually, Sarah and I were there last month. We were there last month to visit our brothers and sisters who have been displaced. And we also looked at how the programming of our partners have evolved. So we have partners who are present there. We mentioned about Teach Peace, Build Peace movement. So they work with schools, with children, with parents and teachers, where they have peace education sessions, not just with children, but also with parents and the educators. So they focus on building peace within yourself, building peace with your family, and then expand it to the community, and then looking at your environment as well. So they have produced different modules from that, and to complement those peace education sessions, there are also other components of that program where they have activities for children such as art. They have mentors who are also volunteers who go to Marawi and the other places in Lanao and including Metro Manila, where they bring the expertise of artists, of songwriters, of poets, so that these their expertise can be shared to these children and also their parents. And we actually saw firsthand how they were able to develop their skills. No? So they even shared with us their artworks when we visited.
Thank you, Attorney Jen. We also have from our chat box a comment from Mr. Kamar Gianni. He says it is timely for every partner to promote this DHF, Document of Human Fraternity. We hope with Ateneo de Davao University and other peace partners to translate in different local languages this document of human fraternity, as this will be the start for this document to be in the mainstream. Someone also asked if we could provide them with a copy. We will be posting the presentation slides on the conference website for all the presentations from this morning and this afternoon. So you can check it out on the website. Ms. Liza Lau also said that she's glad to hear that there are existing modules on peace education for children, and she's wondering if these modules have reached Lumad children, especially the Badjaos.
From our current programming, not yet particularly to the Badjaos, but these modules are, of course, shared with our partners. We have partners who work with different IP groups. So, and the modules can be easily used and translated. So we'll be happy to share that to these communities.
Thank you, Attorney Chan. If we don't have any other questions, I would once again like to thank very much Ms. Sarah and Attorney Jennifer for your time and your expertise. We would like to present you with this certificate of appreciation. So the Office of the Presidential Advisor on Peace, Reconciliation, and Unity and Ateneo de Davao University present this certificate of appreciation to Ms. Sarah Lemusurier for her invaluable contribution as resource speaker during the online conference on healing and reconciliation to moving towards human fraternity. Given this 25th day of April 2022, this will then be signed by Secretary Carlito G. Galvez Jr., the Presidential Advisor on Peace, Reconciliation, and Unity, and Father Joel E. Tabora of the Society of Jesus, the President of the Ateneo de Davao University. The same certificate is also awarded to attorney Jennifer Buay. And that wraps up our discussion for topic 3.